Hello, Caravan Nation. My name is Aaron Heiler. I am a sophomore here at Mount Carmel and do many things, as such as we're doing with the podcast today. I'm here with a very special guest again. He is my current English teacher for sophomores, my XL class. He was a graduate here of 2000. He went to Governor State University. He oversees our sailing club at the Mount Carmel community. And he does our merchant and caravan, which I'm sure many of you have seen. And he also helps oversees our drama club, which we'll be doing later on today. Mr. Baffoe, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, Aaron. How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. How was your Monday? Was it?
It was a Monday.
Yeah, it was a Monday.
There was a lot.
Yeah.
We had T-shirts due for most of the XL sophomores, so they're T-shirts that they'll be wearing on Wednesday for advertising issues of domestic violence and teen dating violence and sexual violence. So we had about 75 of those come pouring into my room that I had to sort through. So had a lot going on today.
Sure, that was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna go straight to that. That was a good segue into it.
I know.
Okay. So what is that? So can you explain the T-shirt project that we were doing in class?
Yeah, so most of the sophomores, your class included, and the honor sophomores are reading or have read a novel this year called Breathing Underwater by Alex Flynn.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting work because it's narrated by a teenage boy who is both a victim of domestic violence but also an abuser himself in his relationship with his girlfriend. And it's a really powerful novel. It's a novel that whenever the students read it, they always have pretty strong reactions to, but overwhelmingly positive reactions to. But it gets a lot of discussion generated from the students when they read that novel. And usually at the end of the year, it's the novel that they comment on the most and reflect on and saying, like, oftentimes it's the novel that guys will say was their favorite of the year. And in conjunction with that, the students who read it all did a T-shirt project where they basically create walking advertisements for statistics about domestic violence and teen dating violence and sexual violence, as well as testimonials from survivors that are also on those T-shirts, along with a phone number and a text number for a helpline that victims or those close to victims can reach out to get help for. And they can also add anything else that's creative and appropriate to the shirt, as well as creativity is part of the grade. So they'll all wear those shirts around school all day on Wednesday, again, acting as walking advertisements for these really important issues. And then also on Wednesday, too, at the end of the day, we're going to have a guest speaker.
Really?
Okay. He's a 2015 graduate of Mount Carmel. His name is Rob Rajic, I believe is how he pronounces his last name. And when he was a student here at Mount Carmel and throughout his childhood, his family experienced domestic violence in a very serious way. And the Mount Carmel community, he says, was very much there to support him during that very difficult time. And he's going to talk about his experience with that with the sophomores.
Yeah. So what made you wanted to do this project or this book?
In all honesty, I've been teaching this book for it's probably like at least 10 years, maybe a dozen years. I'm in my, my 17th year teaching, I think. 17th year. So most of my career has been using this novel. But I didn't discover the novel. It was a former coworker of mine who happened to come across it. And it's a novel that falls into the category of young adult lit.
Okay.
And even though I'm a teacher of young adults, young adult lit is not necessarily my forte. It's not something I spend a lot of my free time reading. So I would not have come across this novel if it wasn't for another teacher that I had worked with, a dozen years ago or so ago, and decided to introduce that novel. And just from the start, when my first year teaching it, I just saw a really different reaction from students reading this novel than reading a lot of other canonical novels.
So do you think you would be able to do this project or this book with a co-ed audience or a co-ed class?
Sure. I've never thought about that because I've never taught in a co-ed environment. But, Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to see how girls would respond to this novel in a high school setting, or especially girls in a mixed class or even an all girls class. I'd be interested to see. I do know that there is a follow up novel to Breathing Underwater, which is written from the perspective of the girlfriend who is the victim of the abuse.
Mm,
I believe it's called Diva. I have not read it. But
sounds good.
yeah, so
Caitlin's
yeah,
point of view.
Caitlin is the character. She is the girlfriend of the protagonist Nick, and she is the victim of abuse at the hands of Nick. She's also a victim of psychological abuse from her own mother. So she comes from an environment before she is even dating Nick that involves abuse. But yeah, so there's a follow up novel that Alex Flynn did from Caitlin's point of view too.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. So you went to Mount Carmel,
Hmm.
right? As a student. It was obviously all boys back then.
Hmm.
What was your reaction when you were? How did you get to Mount Carmel? How did you get to Mount Carmel?
Well, I didn't start in Mount Carmel.
Really?
I transferred here
Whoa!
from another Southside high school.
Into the light,
I
yeah.
won't name it. But
Congratulations,
I had
congratulations.
always wanted to go to Mount Carmel. My dad is a Mount Carmel grad.
Okay.
My dad graduated in 1974.
Hmm.
My dad had five brothers. Four of his five brothers graduated from here as well. So like the Baffoe name was already pretty well established, but
Yeah.
by the time I was coming out of high school, but my mom was a very big proponent of a different high school.
Okay.
So my mom's word kind of was the final say, and I went to a different school. Did not get the best experience at that school. Most of my friends either went to Mount Carmel or to a different school that I also wasn't attending. And after a little while, my parents finally decided that that school was not going to be the best place for me. And I remember one summer I went on a trip through my grade school with some high school kids. And when I got back from that trip, my parents told me, you got to get to bed because you have an early meeting the next morning with the then vice principal at Mount Carmel. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, wow. Like,
Yeah.
it was quite a surprise. And
Yeah.
then, I was a Mount Carmel student after that.
It wasn't Mr. Nolan, was it?
It was not Mr. Nolan, though. Mr. Nolan was a teacher
Right. Yeah.
here
Yeah.
when I went here. Yeah, he was not administration, but he was a history teacher.
So were you? What grade did you transfer into Mount Carmel?
It was after my sophomore year.
Sophomore year.
So,
Okay. And you think you made the right decision, obviously, right?
yeah. Very much so. Yeah, I enjoyed my time here at Mount Carmel very much. It was kind of night and day from my prior high school experience, and it was like things really changed for me. I got involved in a lot more things. I was much more social. I was around a lot of my buddies,
Okay.
and it just coming to school, didn't feel like such a chore that it had felt like before.
Yeah. So you said that you wanted to come to Mount. What drew you to Mount Carmel? Were you into sports? Were you into anything that Mount Carmel did? Was your family spiritual? Did they want you to go to all boys? What brought you?
I played sports in grade school. I wasn't particularly great at any of them,
Hmm.
so I didn't like have like huge athletic aspirations coming to Mount Carmel. Even though Mount Carmel, as it is now, it had a reputation for
Of
great
sports, right?
athletics.
Yeah.
It was really just because I think my dad was a grad and my dad was a Carmel fan, and my dad had taken me to Carmel football games and stuff, and so I was just I felt like I thought I was a Mount Carmel guy, but yeah,
Yeah.
my mom thought otherwise at
Yeah.
the time.
You did something else, right? You did the drama program here while you was a
Yeah,
student.
I was involved in the theater program here. In my senior year, I was one of the lead roles in the musical that they
Nice.
did in the spring.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was called Damn Yankees.
Oh, really?
It was a lot of fun. It was the most fun that
Gotta throw that
I
out.
had here. Yeah, it's a musical about a guy who sells his soul to the devil to be the
Whoa.
best baseball player in the world. To
They
save
allowed
his
that to
struggling
happen.
team. Allowed what to happen?
That they
The
allowed
school?
yeah.
It's a pretty popular standard
Is it?
musical.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing like R-rated about it or
Yeah.
anything. But that's a kind of a tale that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Faust or Doctor Faustus, which is an old medieval tale about the original piece of literature about a guy selling his soul to the devil, and it's been updated in various forms. And Damn Yankees is just kind of a sports themed version of that age old story.
What was your part? What was your role?
Believe it or not, I was the devil.
What?
Yeah,
I thought I saw you in red in that
I was
picture.
I was Satan.
Yeah.
Got to grow a beard and break dress code. They didn't allow facial hair back then.
That's good.
I got to smoke cigarettes on stage.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's is that when they were doing all that?
What
Like
do you mean all that?
that, like that you could, that they would allow that back then?
Well, they only allowed it for my role
Oh, for
for
that.
the play.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like students were just
Oh
walking around the
yeah.
hallways.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
not that old. I think back in the day, yes, there were students that were allowed to smoke, and I know seniors for a long time had an exception, like during lunch. But no, yeah, I was able to smoke during the play itself.
Yeah. Okay. So you were a teacher and you're more involved in the drama club here. Um, how do you see yourself in other students, and how does that reflect your teaching style? Do you see yourself in students here, and then you try to have like a sympathy for them a little bit, or no?
Sympathy would be a strong
Yeah, I
word,
know
but
that
yeah,
sympathy was the wrong word.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I do see myself in a lot of the students. You know, times change, technology changes, the way we go about teaching in a lot of ways changes. When I was a student, we didn't have one-to-one devices. We didn't have cell phones.
Wow.
But so now that's obviously an integral part of the classroom now. But despite all that, like teenage guys at Carmel, they're not really all that different from the year 2000 when I graduated, and I'm sure somebody like a Mr. Nolan or a Mr. Antonetti who graduated from here in like the 1980s and who were teachers when I was a student here, they would probably tell you that there wasn't much different from
Yes,
students in the 1980s as there were in the 2000s.
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I see myself in my students all the time. I'll get a reaction from students, or some students will say things, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I would have said
Mm.
as a student, especially because I was kind of a class clown.
Really?
Yeah,
What?
and yeah. If I got bored in a teacher's class, that was often a problem for the teacher because then I just kind of resorted to entertaining myself and
Mm.
entertaining those around me. But and of course I have students that fit that mold.
Do the same thing, right?
But I like to think that my classes are so engaging that students never get bored and don't have to resort to trying to
Yeah,
entertain
of
themselves. I'm
course.
sure
Yeah.
you've never seen
No.
that happen or anything
No.
in one of my classes, of
No.
course. But yeah, so from time to time I do have to remind myself that like, hey, I was one of these guys once,
Right.
and I I react accordingly.
Okay. So what brought you back to Mount Carmel?
There was a job opening here 4 years ago. 'Cause I'm in my fourth year. Yeah, the fourth year here at Carmel teaching. And I was just interested in what Carmel had to offer. Was kind of looking for a change of pace in my work life. I had been teaching elsewhere for 13, 14 years prior to that, and but yeah, I called up Mr. Tabernacky and explored what the job was all about and what it might offer, and I just felt that at the time Mount Carmel would be a better fit for me.
Yeah. So did you always want to be an English teacher, or did you always want to be a teacher in education?
No,
What did you want to be?
no. If you would have told me when I was in high school at Mount Carmel that I would be teaching, let alone teaching at Mount Carmel, I would have laughed you out of the room. I originally studied theater in college.
Ah.
I was going to be an actor. That's what I
Okay.
thought. I wanted to be an actor going into college. Very much propelled from my experience here at Mount Carmel doing that musical my senior year. And then I got to college and I realized I was coming from being kind of a big fish in a small pond,
Yeah.
and the rest of the theater majors were as good, if not much better than I was. And it didn't discourage me so much, but I also just kind of stepped back and considered, what the life of an actor involves, and it's like not everybody's going to graduate from college and be the next Tom Cruise or Denzel Washington.
Right.
And it for a lot of actors, it's not all that different from like trying to be a pro athlete. It could be a lot of struggling in the minor leagues for a long time and not really making a lot of money. And my parents were always supportive of me pursuing acting, but I remember my dad saying once to me, he goes, "I'm totally fine with that, but you will not live in my basement,
Yeah.
for the rest of your adulthood." And so part of the way through college, I stepped back and took some inventory of my life and decided that even though I still loved acting, I still love it today. I also had some influential teachers in my life and thought that maybe I could have that sort of influence on students that teachers had on me. And English was always my best subject. Really, English and history was all I was ever really good at. And I was always a good writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, maybe I could be good at teaching writing and teaching literature that I was a big fan of. And so I decided to switch up my major, and I became an English major with a focus on secondary education.
The humble beginnings of Mr. Baffoe. I like it.
Yeah.
So was there any type of television that you liked that made you want to be interested in theater? Was there any type of like genres that you like, any actors that you like that kind of molded that interest?
Yeah. As a teenager, I was comedy was always really big for me.
Who's one of your favorite comedies?
Oh, my favorite comics. George Carlin,
Hmm.
Chris Rock. There's just so many great stand-ups, especially like in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid. Like that was like really like the golden
Yeah,
era of stand-up
at peak.
comedy.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's still stand-ups obviously today that are, very prominent, but like stand-up comedy was just like a way bigger thing,
yeah,
25, 30 years ago. But also just like comedy programs, sitcoms, like
yeah.
on TV. Saturday Night Live was huge for me when I was a kid. I was always a big fan of that. I'm a giant fan of The Simpsons,
Okay.
the golden era of The Simpsons, which is an animated show, so it's voice acting. But yeah, the golden era of The Simpsons in the 1990s is for me still like the best comedy writing I think that I've ever consumed. I love the show Seinfeld. It's a brilliant show. But like sketch comedy and stand up comedy were always something that I was really interested in watching.
Yeah. So, was there a Mr. Baffoe when you were a child? Was there a type of teacher like yourself that kind of played into the teaching person that you are?
Yeah, teachers that influenced me a lot, besides my own mother, who was a teacher herself.
Did she teach English too?
No, my mom taught, when I was very young, my mom taught special ed, but for kids who were physically disabled.
Mm,
So kids with like severe physical disabilities
yeah.
like spina bifida and cerebral palsy and things like that. And then my mom became a first grade teacher.
Okay.
And she was also the vice principal at her school during the end of her career. But so my mom, education was always very important in my house, and so was like reading. My mom had like mandatory reading time for us as kids, and me and my brothers. And I hated it at the time,
Right.
being forced to spend time doing any reading. But I greatly appreciate it now because I know that really helped me become the reader and especially the writer that I would become later on. But when I was then in grade school, I would say my fifth grade teacher, her name was Mrs. Mead at St. Cajetan. Mrs. Mead was my favorite teacher at St. Cajetan. She just had a fantastic personality. She had just a crazy amount of energy, especially dealing with a bunch of fifth graders all day. She just never quit though, and we did so many interesting things. I remember in her class, there was so much fun that went on in her class that was tied to the stuff we were learning. I still remember having to get up in front of the class and recite all the bones in the human body and kind of sort of learning a rhyme and a song to that. And some of the novels that we read back then still, like the Phantom Toll Booth and the Bridge to Terabithia. I still remember those from fifth grade.
Hmm.
And then in high school, I had some really good teachers here at Mount Carmel. The one that stands out the most, though, would be Coach E, Kurt Ehrenstrom
Okay.
was his name. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But I had Coach E for my junior year. I had him for college algebra and trig along with honors physics, and then my senior year I had him for AP physics. So nothing related to English whatsoever. He was kind of the opposite side, the math and science aspect. And I was not good in those subjects. And still, Coach E was such a great guy. He was a really good teacher, even for someone who struggled with the material like I did, and just had an amazing personality. His personality as a teacher has always resonated with me. Coach E treated you like a person. He didn't, talk to you like you were a little kid. Both in good ways and bad ways. If you were doing well, but also if you needed a kick in the rear end
Hmm.
too. And Coach, I kept up correspondence even with him after I graduated, and when I became a teacher and I was teaching at a different school, I would still correspond with Coach E all the time. And he was just a really, really good dude, and I really wish he was still alive and that I would have had the opportunity to teach with him.
Hmm. So you didn't get to teach with him.
No, he
Okay.
passed away before I came to Mount Carmel.
And
Yeah.
he was the coach of what?
He coached. He was assistant coach on football.
Okay.
He may have done some other sports throughout his career. He taught at Carmel for I don't know 25 years probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a football assistant coach mostly. Yeah.
So you're the moderator of our sailing club here.
Mm-hmm.
What made did you start that, or was that already built in?
No, that was already
Dante?
going. Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't. Definitely did not start the sailing program because I am not a sailor.
Really? You're
Yeah,
just a moderator.
I knew
Okay.
I knew nothing about sailing before I agreed to help. No pun intended, captain this ship. But
Come on, that was pun intended.
it
Come
was
on.
actually the pun was very intended. But I'm enjoying it and
Hmm.
I'm learning as I go. The sailing team is incredibly fortunate to have a ton of help from folks who are both alumni of Mount Carmel who are very passionate about sailing, as well as folks who work over at the Jackson Harbor Yacht Club
Hmm.
and lend their time to us at no cost.
That's
Uh,
good.
yeah, and there are adult and student instructors over there who help our guys out and really do so much of the legwork while I'm just kind of there making sure everything is copacetic, and that nobody falls in the water when they're not supposed to or anything.
Yeah.
But I'm learning as I go, and in the 2 seasons, this past fall season, which just wrapped up, and the spring season prior to that, I've learned a lot about sailing that I would not have known otherwise, and I'm continuing to learn more and eager for the team to start getting into competition.
Yeah. So you just started it, and you're learning as the kids are going along with it.
Hmm.
Is it fun? Is it cold? Is it depressing?
It is fun. It can be very cold. It all depends on the weather. What's interesting is the way that the Lake Michigan works
Yeah.
in Chicago is that in the spring when it's the weather is a bit warmer, the water is extremely cold
Mm.
because it's spent all winter getting super super cold and then it hasn't warmed up yet. And then in the fall when the weather is turning chillier, that's when the water's the warmest.
Okay.
So this fall season, the water's really warm, and the guys don't mind if if their boat tips over or if they fall in or whatever. It's not a big deal. In the spring, a lot of the time, the guys when they're sailing, they'll have to wear what are called dry suits, and they're called dry suits. They're not wetsuits. Those are two different things. And what a dry suit does is keep you underneath the suit totally dry. It doesn't let any water in whatsoever, and it's worn usually in those really cold water temperatures.
Is it like a raincoat?
No, it kind of looks like a spacesuit without the helmet
Okay.
in a lot of ways. When the guys wear them, everyone who sees pictures of it says like it looks like they're about to go to the moon.
Space, yeah.
But yeah, it's designed to make sure that none of that freezing cold water gets in
Yeah.
because it's not good for your body. Will react very poorly to being completely surrounded by cold water.
All right. Okay. So is it a competition? Real quick, is it a competition?
There are competitions. Mount Carmel has not been involved in any formal competitions yet.
Okay.
We're close to that. There's a Midwest sailing, like high school sailing association that handles like actual formal races among the schools in the area that do have sailing teams.
Yeah.
So those would be teams like your Jones College Prep, Latin, St. Ignatius, Loyola. But we're the only South Side, definitely Catholic school, but like if you don't count St. Ignatius as South Side, South Side. But as far south as this is, we're the only South Side school, I
That's
believe,
actually
that has a sailing program.
yeah. Okay. You also do our merchant in the caravan here.
Hmm.
Did you start that? I don't know if you started that. Did you start that?
I did not start the Caravan. The Caravan definitely predates me. That's the school newspaper that's been around for
Right.
a
That's
long,
what
long
I've heard.
time.
Yeah. I was making sure.
So the Caravan existed when I was a student here, but it was only in print form.
Right.
Now the Caravan newspaper is entirely
Online.
online at mccaravan.org. Everyone should go check that out. Got a lot of content going on mccaravan.org. You can see all the latest news, sports, opinion, and feature stories that our guys in the 21st century media class are coming up with. So the Caravan newspaper is produced inside a class, so it's not an extracurricular activity. And it was that way 25 years ago when I was a student. It was part of the class that was then just called journalism. And so, no, I did not start that. But The Merchant, yeah. So I had moderated a satirical newspaper at my previous school that I was at. And when I came over here, I'm a big fan of satire,
Okay.
and particularly like satirical writing and satirical news. I'm a huge fan of the publication called The Onion. The Onion is kind of the standard satirical news publication that's been around for decades. It was something that when I was a student here, I was a huge fan of, but it usually back then it only existed in print copy. It was not online. And I remember having a classmate here who took dual credit courses at the University of Chicago. So, like once or twice a week, he would leave in the middle of the day and go take a class over at the University of Chicago. And me and my buddies would always make him come back with a bunch of copies of the physical newspaper, The Onion, because that was the only place nearby that you could get it.
Yeah.
So he would come back from his class at the University of Chicago with just, carrying a giant stack of the Onion and pass them out to all of us. And then, unfortunately, whatever teachers had us for the rest of the day kind of lost our attention because we would just be reading and laughing at the Onion for the rest of the class period. But
You brought that kind of to here.
yeah, so satirical news. How that started for me at a high school level was I had just in a class I was teaching a lesson on satire, and for a class project I had the students together as a class kind of just create their own little satirical newspaper, just a one-time thing. But it kind of got passed around the school, and it was such a hit that my principal at this other school at the time said, we need to make this like an extracurricular activity, and asked me if I would like to moderate it. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so that became a pretty successful thing over at this other school. And then when I came over to Mount Carmel, I wanted to keep doing that. I wanted to get students to appreciate satire and satirical news and satirical writing. And what's been great about The Merchant is so many of the guys have kind of pioneered. Oh, I shouldn't say pioneer is not the right word, but taken upon themselves to expand it not just from written satirical news, but to creating video content and audio content and things like that, which I was not doing with the publication at my previous school. So The Merchant has both print and video content, all of it humorous, all of it poking fun at ourselves here in the Mount Carmel community, showing that we can laugh at ourselves. And we have a new issue coming out, hopefully very soon. Guys were turning in their drafts for this next issue this week, and we're going to be doing some peer review and editing about that this week. And hopefully by either the end of this week or early next week, we'll have that new issue out with a special mystery guest editor.
Whoa.
Who is going to be guest editing a celebrity guest editor.
A celebrity guest.
Celebrity guest editor of
The Mount Carmel?
Merchant. Of The Merchant.
all right.
So big time, big. Think very big.
The professionals here.
Celebrity guest editor of The Merchant in our next issue. So be on the lookout for that.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. I'm not gonna lie, I did get tricked. I was pranked. Somebody gave me The Merchant, and I thought it was a real article. The co-ed thing. I don't know if you know about that.
Mm-hmm.
Changing into co-ed schools. I thought because that talk was going on when I was a freshman, and they gave me the newspaper. He's like, oh, that the only reason we go to co-ed is because the whole girl thing. I was like, oh yeah, football. That sounds about right. Yeah, no, it's
that is it's one of the highest compliments somebody who's creating satire can get is when people
think it's real.
Think it's real.
Yeah, that was actually pretty good. I think James McCormick wrote that.
Okay.
So kudos to him. So yeah, that's you're having fun with that. I see. We're having some celebrity editors come in.
Mm-hmm.
So are you ever overwhelmed when you
Every day.
Every day, really?
No, I mean I'm kidding. It's
So like what's your teach? What do you think people see you as a teacher? Do you think people,
How do my students see me as a teacher? Yes. I don't know. I'm
really.
Well, I mean, how do you? What would you say is the vibe?
I don't know
about me as a teacher.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. When I was telling people I was going to do you as a podcast guest, it's either one or the other. They really like you or they really don't like you. Because the thing is, you're you're very different as a teacher, and we don't have that because you make a lot of English teachers. To be honest with you, I actually never had I feel like I never had a bad English teacher ever. To be honest, but a lot of teachers don't make us like actually read and check up on us and things like that.
Okay.
They just go with the flow and
Okay.
what we're doing, and
Hmm.
you don't do that. Um, so yeah, that's why I think it kind of depends on the person that is doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I kind of wanted to ask: are you overwhelmed in coming to school? Because I feel like there's a character that you not a character that you have, but like it's like your own personality
Hmm.
that you do. So do you think that people see you in a good way, a bad way?
Like you said, both. I think it would be interesting if you were to ask the same question near the end of third trimester and now near the end of first trimester,
Okay.
because I think a lot of students who maybe take issue with my class as of right now are doing so because like you kind of mentioned, it's the first time maybe that they've really been held accountable
Right.
with their work, which I'm big on.
Yeah.
I'm big on being on time, having your work on time, showing up on time.
Also, you also check everyone's work,
I
which a
check
lot of
everyone's
a
work.
lot of teachers don't do.
Yeah,
So yeah.
but to be honest, that's because I care,
Right. Exactly.
and I want to see guys do their best, and I don't want to let guys just feel like they can coast or get by. I always want someone to show me their best effort, and a lot of guys aren't necessarily used to that. A lot of guys, in previous experience, may not have been held accountable. And whenever I hear a student say like, "Mr. Baffoe's class is hard," I think a high school boy saying that any teacher's class is hard, it just really translates to that teacher holds me accountable and expects my best.
Hmm.
And that's what I do. And I think if you ask most of those same students by the end of the sophomore year that they have me, or when I taught juniors here at the end of junior year, those who might have had a certain opinion of me in late October might have a different opinion of me in late May. And that's not going to be universal. But I think a lot of guys that have already had me for a full year will have a much different opinion of me than most of the guys who have only had me for a class for a couple months.
Yeah.
And they will see that by the time the year is over, it's going to kind of click for them, and
Hmm.
they're going to understand the method to my classroom, and that nothing I do with them, if it seemed negative, is personal, and that I try to treat everybody fairly. That was another thing I was going to mention when you said I hope I'm perceived as fair, even if I might be perceived as tough. But it's all about accountability, because my job as a teacher here is not so much to teach you Shakespeare.
Hmm.
Okay. You're not going to remember 90% of the novels and short stories and poems and plays that you read in high school 10 years from now. I don't. Okay. But what you are going to remember, or what you're going to take with you, is values and habits that the teachers at Mount Carmel instilled in you. And that's what I think is incumbent upon me, is to teach you guys that there is a certain way you handle yourself and that you handle your responsibilities, and that everything is about the choices you make, and you got to be responsible for your choices. At the beginning of every one of our classes, we start with a prayer, and then what happens right after that prayer, Aaron?
I'm the captain of my soul. I'm the Wait, what did you say?
I am the master of my fate.
I'm the captain of my soul. There we go.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
final line of the poem Invictus.
Hmm.
And we talk about that the very first day of class, because I set the tone that this is all about choices.
Yeah.
And you can choose to not do your homework. I can't make you do your homework. You could choose not to do the reading. It's not. I can't force you to do any reading. But if you also make those choices, you have to accept the consequences for those choices.
Hmm. That's good.
So everything is about choices.
That's good.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And you don't get to whine about it later or try to make excuses later. Do it or don't do it. And like I said, by the end of the year, guys get it for the most part. Not everybody. There's still going to be guys that aren't going to break from their poor habits, and that's okay. I'm not going to change the world, but I know, because I was that same student that I'm trying to break those bad habits of. I was not a very disciplined student when I was in high school.
Okay.
Okay, I was lazy a lot of times. I was the guy who was doing work at the last minute. Okay, and it wasn't until I got to college that I kind of had to break myself from that. But I had teachers here at Mount Carmel that tried to do that. Coach Ehrenstrom was one of them. Coach Ehrenstrom was a guy who didn't accept late work. He didn't take excuses. And that's his method of that was something that resonated with me from the day I graduated from Mount Carmel and moved on from here. I always could hear Coach E's voice in my head whenever it was something dealing with like late work or wanting to come up with an excuse for making a poor choice.
Yeah.
He was not about that stuff. And so that's just what I want to transfer to my students. Again, you're not going to be Shakespeare experts when you walk into my class. You're not necessarily going to be a bunch of English majors that, oh, I had Baffoe, I want to major in English, when I move
Yeah.
on to college. Hopefully, but probably not. And that's okay. But I want you guys to pick up habits that I wish I had picked up, when I was in high school, and that definitely did pick up when I was leaving Mount Carmel and moved on into college and had to have a lot more self-discipline. And so anybody that sees me as tough, they just need to know that I'm trying to help you out. It is not personal, and it is not me out to get anybody. It is me trying to help you become the best version of you can be by the time you get out of Mount Carmel.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. I was also what you do a great job as a teacher. Um, you do extra credit, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is a great thing that you do. Not just because of my grade, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, the extra credit that you give isn't just like give me supplies for class. Just something that's not related to school. You actually do things that can help us. Um, like what you said, that it's not just just reading Shakespeare and knowing Shakespeare, but actually things that can help us in this modern world. Like you
Mm-hmm.
tell us to go to museums or listen to podcasts, listen to movies. And I encourage people who even have a good grade in class to still like do those things with if they have free time because those are great. Um,
That's why I call them outside learning opportunities. So
okay,
yeah,
right,
the extra credit opportunities in my classes, they're called outside learning opportunities because I want the extra credit to be a learning opportunity. It's
yeah,
not just going to be something you can mail in and try to get extra credit for.
hmm
Also, too, the extra credit work is usually going to involve more work than maybe the homework assignment that you didn't do that
yeah.
you're doing the
I know,
extra credit to
I
make
know,
up for.
yeah.
That's why I want to incentivize doing the homework first and foremost. But yeah, so I want my extra credit opportunities to be things that are outside of my class, not necessarily related to my class, that still provide learning opportunities. Like you said, going to certain museums, but not the major touristy Chicago museums. You're not getting extra credit for going to the Shedd Aquarium or the Museum of Science and Industry. But if you go to the Museum of Contemporary Art, definitely if you go to the DuSable Museum of African American History, that like those are the kind of museums that are sort of off the beaten path
Right.
and write about your experiences attending that stuff for sure. Or if you're watching certain educational programs, the big one that a lot of guys do is watching episodes of like Frontline on PBS and writing a reflection on that. And most of the Frontline episodes have nothing to do with my class, but that's okay. Those are still learning opportunities, or listening to certain podcasts that have educational value, or showing me how to cook a meal and teaching me step by step how to prepare a meal is an extra credit option because I think, being able to cook is an important skill and something that I love to do and that I was not big on when I was in high school, but learned how to cook when I was in college and kind of fell in love with it. And it's something I appreciate a lot. And I think, people who are self sufficient, responsible men need to
Can
know
do
how
it.
to cook and cook
Yeah.
well. And, I love cooking. So you show me how to do that, or show me, doing a debate with a friend on a silly topic, but
I
just
gotta do
showing,
that one. Yeah.
but just showing me that you can, hold up a debate for about 20 minutes with somebody, things
And
like that.
serious, yeah.
Yeah. So those are again, with guys who might think my class is tough, I still give you opportunities. If you screw up, you make a mistake, I give you opportunities to make up for it too.
And I did. Uh, I've done two of those, and you can ask any of my family members. Actually, I've started reading more books now that I'm in your class,
Really?
like personal books.
Imagine that.
From your class, and I actually lost one. I'm not gonna lie, I lost one of my books, and I was like really looking for it. And it was like, "What are you looking for?" I said a book, and it was like, "No, no, no, no. What are you actually looking for?" Because my mom reads books, my grandma reads books,
Hmm.
and it's really book reading is more like brought up in like older people, people that like realize that that's more important, and going on walks and going to museums. People that who realize that it's more important later on, they start to do things like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that it does it definitely makes an impact. Did you come up with that, the outside learning thing? Did you
Yeah.
come up with all those? If you're not in this class, it's a huge list. I was wondering if you made that, like you put all the
Oh
links in
yeah,
there.
yeah. That's all Baffoe original. Yep.
That's good.
Hmm.
That's good. All right. Um. So you said earlier. I'll go backtrack a little bit. You said earlier, um, that you see yourself and that the boys that here today are kind of like the same as the boys in 2000 or 1960s, things like that. Do you think there is like a major change in anything that Mount Carmel stood for?
Not that Mount Carmel stands for. No, I think the values the Carmel's all about
Or
are those
still
are
here?
kind of pillars.
Yeah. Of
Um,
What Mount Carmel is. Yeah.
yeah. The changes I see from when I was a student are obviously like technological.
Yeah. I
Um,
was just about to ask you that. Yeah.
yeah. So like your guys' world, educationally and outside of the classroom, is so tech based and so saturated with technology. Um, when I was a student, like using a computer in a classroom, first of all, you didn't have your own. There was no like laptops we carried around, and there was only certain rooms in the entire school that contained computers. Period. So like using a computer was like only for special assignments and
Yeah.
things, or else you were doing your work at home on a computer if you had a home computer. But so you guys, technology is just so much a part of your lives, and my teaching has had to adapt to that,
I
and
was. Yeah.
that's I've learned to make that an integral part of my life. But I don't know. I don't want to sound like an old guy here, but I feel like a lot of guys in your generation are not as self sufficient as I think they could be,
And should be.
and I think technology is somewhat contributing to that. Just because technology makes our lives like so much easier, but one of the downfalls of that is, it can make our lives too easy sometimes, and then when we actually do need to apply ourselves, sometimes we just don't know how to do that because we're just not used to it.
Right.
Like what was the first novel we read in my class?
Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451, which speaks about the dangers of that very thing,
Right.
of becoming too reliant and too obsessed with technology to the point where we're not able to think for ourselves anymore. We're not able to function without technology. Or if technology happens to fail us, we're like lost.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, I couldn't do my homework because my iPad died. It's like, well, there's other ways to get the homework done,
Yeah.
So I would like to see guys be starting to learn to be a little bit more self-sufficient, especially as they're headed off onto college, and where you're going to have professors that aren't going to take those excuses. You don't get to tell a professor that my computer wasn't working, things like that. So that'd be that's one of the big differences. But again, I think as I said earlier, it's Carmel guys are still Carmel guys in the same way. Still wearing polo shirts and khaki pants like I was doing,
Yeah.
25 years ago. He's still grumbling about having to go to mass and having to wake up. And if we don't get a late start on Wednesday, it's like, why not? Where's our late start? So in 90% of the ways, I think, you know, an Aaron Heiler is the same way as a sophomore or junior Tim Baffoe.
Right. Yeah. Uh, have your class changed with artificial intelligence coming up a little bit? Could you teach English
Hmm.
and our quizzes, our tests are essay based?
Hmm.
So has AI changed the way your classroom has operated?
Yeah, I've had to be much more aware of that now because unfortunately, I think there's a lot of guys in a lot of peers of yours who their reflex has become, when they're told that they have to write something, electronically, that their reflex is, well, I'm just going to have ChatGPT do this for me.
Yeah.
And well, that's not writing. ChatGPT is not writing. It's not you using your brain. It goes back to that Fahrenheit 451 thing. It's letting the machines do our brain work for us. It's not so much a problem if machines are doing our physical work for us, but it's when they start doing our brain work for us that becomes a really big problem.
Our thinking and
Yeah.
mental. Yeah.
And so using ChatGPT, while it might seem like a quick fix in the immediate, it has harm over a long term because guys are not using that brain muscle. The brain isn't technically a muscle, but it functions like a muscle in many ways. And if you don't work it out, if you don't, constantly lift weights with your brain gets flabby
That's
and your
good.
brain gets weak. And yeah, lifting weights in a real weight program, it can be tough. A good weight regimen makes you sore. It makes you sweat. It might not be something you want to, when you go, the guys who go to Caravan Tough in the morning, that remarkable weight program that we have here, a lot of guys don't want to wake up and go to Caravan Tough, but they do it. And I wish, there was sort of a Caravan Tough mentality to doing writing and reading for more guys. And so when it comes to written responses, yes, now there are guys who often think that they can sneak by AI generated stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I catch it 100% of the time. I'm sure guys could tell you that they've snuck some things past me, but I like to think I'm pretty darn good at it. And what's important is for any teacher of writing to understand what their students' writing looks like. And so when I understand what Aaron Heiler writes like, hypothetically, if you were to ever try to, you know,
No,
sneak
never,
something that
never,
was
never,
AI generated
never.
by me, I would be able to read that AI generated piece and be like, this is not Aaron's voice.
Mm-hmm.
This is not his writing voice. I know Aaron's writing style. And so I do that. I try to get to know what all my students as writers look like. But also too, like, I'm not out here to, you know, if you are doing honest work, I I want to help you. I want to help you. And I want to see what you do well with your own brain and your own God-given talents. And then where you're coming up short, we can work with that and improve on that. And if you're giving me AI-generated work, well, I can't help you. You can't help yourself. You don't know what you're doing well and where your shortcomings are. And as a teacher of writing, I can only help anyone become a better writer if I see your honest and genuine work. And then I think you have plenty of students, if they have done honest work with me, will tell you that from the time they walked in my door in August to the time they walked out of my room in May or June, I made them a better writer
Yeah.
if they were actually putting in the work and doing what they were supposed to do. And I'm not one to toot my own horn here, but I know that I have every year guys who are in college who were in my classroom as a high school student who reach out to me or who I run into at the grocery store or something and tell me like, hey, just want to let you know, like, college writing is not a chore for me because of
Mm,
your class.
that's good.
And that's one of the best compliments I can get. That's all. That's my goal as
As a
far as like a
teacher.
writing teacher
Yeah.
goes. Is I want to make college easier for you. I want to make writing assignments easier for you. I want to make in your professional life at whatever job you're doing. I want you to be able to compose written responses that a lot of people don't realize that you don't have to be a writer to have a job that involves a lot of writing. Most jobs, unless they're just manual labor, are probably going to involve writing in some way, shape, or form. And that your coworkers and your bosses are going to judge you if they can't see you put a sentence together
Yeah.
in writing, okay? Or can't, string together multiple sentences that make sense. So, yeah, to be able to hear somebody who went through my class and moves on to college and says like, hey, writing papers in college was much more of a breeze for me because of what the gauntlet you put me through.
Right.
I take that as like one of the highest compliments I can get.
So we don't every school doesn't have a whole bunch of Bishop Baffles as their English teachers, right? And as the world is progressing into a more I don't want to say artificial of that lax
There could be
thinking
like Baffoe AI where like you could like create artificial teachers
teachers,
that
yeah.
are artificial versions of me.
Yeah. I'm,
Maybe I could make some money off that.
okay, all right. Let's not
That's a
think
good
about
idea
that. No,
actually. I'm
no,
gonna
no, no, no.
keep that in mind.
Later date, later date,
Okay.
later date. But do you think that you could use is AI a big bad thing? That
AI is not totally bad.
okay,
AI, like any technology, almost all technology is invented for good.
and people
And the
use it.
problem is that people abuse it or use
Yeah,
it for bad.
right.
So, like, when the people that have created AI, first of all, AI is involved in much more than like ChatGPT and
Yeah,
stuff. If you got an iPhone, your iPhone learns your texting habits and will try to like auto complete for you to try to help you.
algorithms.
And yeah, sometimes there are algorithms that work for good. Sometimes there are algorithms that work for bad. Google Gmail has AI built into it now, where Gmail will suggest for me how to like just write the email for me if I need to send an email to a parent or a colleague or something like that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But again, it's when we completely hand over our brains to the machines and stop using that brain muscle again, that it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
But AI in the classroom can be used for very good things. Like you can use ChatGPT in the classroom as a teacher to show students, like give ChatGPT a writing prompt and see what it churns out, and then analyze how poorly ChatGPT actually writes, because it doesn't actually do a very good job when you really analyze it of producing good writing, which is why when guys use ChatGPT, it's often such a dead giveaway when I'm reading their responses. Not just that it's not their own writing voice, but that it's just not really well written. So that's one thing you can do. You can use ChatGPT as like a chat bot. So like you could ask it to pretend to be a character from literature or history and talk to it as though it were, Abraham Lincoln
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
Hamlet from Shakespeare or whomever. And it will, based on what it gathers from the intrawebs, it will respond as that character or that historical figure. And that can be a fun thing to mess around with. So AI has uses that are beneficial. It's just, again, it goes back to any form of technology that's ever been invented. Its initial purposes were good, and at some point somebody takes it and corrupts it.
Flips it. Yeah.
Dynamite. Dynamite was invented as a tool for the mining industry, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and it did a great job. Blowing holes into the rock formations to do mining. But then at some point, someone said, "Hey, I can use this to kill somebody,"
Right.
and then that's where dynamite then becomes a problem. But dynamite's initial creation was for good, not for bad. So same thing goes for using a chatbot.
Do you ever think we'll get to that point to where we can use AI more in classrooms and that students can be trusted to use it?
Yes. The thing about technology is it moves so dang fast,
Right.
and we're always catching up to it. And teachers are always kind of catching up a little bit slower than the students are, because one thing that you guys have an advantage over, people older than you is, your brains absorb that stuff way more quickly, and you adapt to technological use way
And that's our
more.
life.
Yeah,
That
way
we
more.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're so
Hobbies.
immersed in it.
Right.
And just the human brain. The older the human brain gets, the harder it is to adapt to things and to pick up new forms of quote unquote language, whether that be a literal foreign language or some kind of new technology. And so the students are always kind of a step ahead of the teachers.
Okay.
And but teachers, luckily, do have resources and educators across the world that are doing their best to also say, all right, let's not just take AI as a bad thing that we have to punish, but let's try to harness it and kind of take the bad out of it by bringing it into the classroom and using it for good. And I'm literally in a professional development course right now that meets like once a month that is examining how to bring AI into the classroom in positive and fun ways.
Okay. So I didn't realize the time on here. We've been here for a minute. I do have two last questions for you. Um, so I'm sure you have heard this before in the Mount Carmel community.
I'm your favorite teacher.
Oh no.
Oh,
Oh no
okay.
no no. I'm sorry.
So I thought you were going to say.
It's good. Good guess though. Good guess. But if you were a sandwich, what sandwich would you be?
I would be a hot dog.
Really?
Yeah.
And you're one of those people that says a hot dog is a
Hot dog is a sandwich.
so that's a double whammy there. You just told us that
Yeah.
hot dog is a sandwich.
Because I would be a hot dog because I think I'm I'm sometimes misunderstood.
I'm sorry.
I'm
Just a hot
misunderstood,
dog.
and
bald head,
I contain multitudes, just like the
Yeah.
multitudes of animal parts that go into a hot dog.
Okay. All right. Um, yeah. And the last question is, do you have anything you want to leave to the Mount Carmel community? Built on Dante, anything you want to leave? It's all fine if you don't.
Shout out to the Built on Dante listening audience.
Yeah.
I was really honored to be asked to be a guest on
Yeah.
here.
And he freeballed all these answers. I didn't send him the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, I love my job. I like being a teacher. I've done it for a while now. I think if you asked a lot of my teachers when I was in high school, they would be surprised that I was a teacher too. But it's something I really enjoy doing. And I do it because not a day goes by students don't make me laugh. And no matter what else is going on during the day, their ability to make me laugh is something that makes it all worthwhile. And also just, when I have students tell me, like, hey, I appreciate what you're doing, or I really get it. I didn't get something earlier on in your class, but now I get it and I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And whether that be a kid at the end of a school year or a kid 5 years later, or a kid who's in college who shoots me an email or whatever, it makes it all worthwhile. And I really enjoy being a part of the Mount Carmel community and being a teacher
And we appreciate
and
you.
having the privilege of being able to call myself a Mount Carmel teacher.
Yes, we do appreciate you. You're very impactful on everyone. I don't know if that's a good way, good thing, bad thing, but I hope it's a good thing. It's a good thing for me.
I appreciate that.
Um, well, that was built on Dante. I want to dedicate this one episode to Miss Minky. Thank you, Miss Minky, for all that you do for standing here for this long amount of time. My name is Aaron Hyler. I'm a sophomore here at Mount Carmel, and that is built on Dante. Thank you.